Mark Schoem, quien ahora nos hablará acerca de la preparación para la implementación exitosa de un recall. Vamos a darle, por favor, otro fuerte aplauso.
Again, thank you. For those of you who made it, I'll get started, and the rest I think will join us. This is an area that I feel very passionate about and I feel very close to. When I started at the Consumer Product Safety Commission, I used to answer the phones, literally the hotline, the toll-free number where consumers complained. So I talked to a lot of consumers, and I navigated myself into the Office of Compliance, where I rose from a compliance officer up to the deputy director. So compliance is where I feel most comfortable with and where I think we interact with industry the most. Before I do get started, I wanted to point out another Consumer Product Safety Commission employee who has been here for the last couple of days and will be here for another couple of days, Tilvin Bernal, who is in our international programs. Many of you may know Tilvin. Rich O'Brien, who was the director of that office, was here until this morning. But I wanted to at least let you know that if you need assistance, if you need help, if you have questions about anything I've said or anything Carol said, as it relates to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Tilvin is an excellent resource. She's not only my personal translator, but she understands compliance and she understands risk management probably better than me sometimes. So Tilvin, feel free to reach out to Tilvin if you have questions, any kind of questions on recalls or anything CPSC. What I wanted to talk about now was recalls. And I was trying to think about how recalls have changed over my 40-plus year career. And I don't know that it's much different. We still kind of do things the same way. It's a voluntary, we call it a voluntary recall. We don't really force companies to undertake a recall. We would prefer that they work with us to develop a program that will be most effective to reach the consumer. There are a number of steps that have to be taken whenever the decision is made to conduct a recall. And what I'm not really discussing is how we got to the decision to do a recall. I'm assuming that either our investigation or the company has a reporting obligation to tell us about a defect or a problem, so that we've gotten to the point where there's an agreement to do a recall, to conduct a recall. And there are certain steps that have to be done. You've got to stop production. You've got to stop distribution. You've got to stop the retail sales of that particular product. And a key element would then be the voluntary notice to the consumers, as well as what the remedy is. So I'm going to talk mostly about notification and a little bit about remedy. These are the best practices that CPSC has developed over some 40 years. There is no, again, just like everything else with product safety, I don't know that there's any right way or wrong way to conduct a recall. The most important aspect of doing a recall is to prevent future injuries, prevent future deaths from occurring from a hazardous product. So by any means that you can notify the consumer, notify the marketers, notify people to stop using the product and to take it out of their possession, that would constitute, I think, an effective recall. One of the things that we constantly have discussions with companies about is what is a recall. And I don't know if it's your experience or just an experience in the United States. Companies hate to use the word recall because they believe it denotes some type of negative connotation about their product. Yes, that's true. Your product may kill somebody. Your product may hurt somebody. You've got to take immediate steps to alert the consumer and get their attention. And over the years, we believe that the word recall is a key word that media and consumers and businesses understand that you need to take some type of action. So almost every corrective action that we conduct with a company, the word recall will be in the heading. And that's an important part for companies to understand. So any company that distributes in the United States that is dealing with Latin American countries will know that there's an expectation that when you announce the program, that there's an expectation that you use certain words. Generally, a recall means that there's either a repair or a replacement or some type of refund. Under our statute, under our law, consumers are supposed to be made whole for any damages or for any loss from the product. Companies try to say that the product has been out there for 10 years. The consumer may have spent $20. After 10 years use, why do they have to give them a new product? Well, it's the right thing to do. We could do less reasonable allowance for use, which means that the $20 you paid 10 years ago, maybe the product is worth only $1 today. So why can't I just give out $1? Well, our argument always is that the risk remains the same. Whether you bought it today or you bought it 10 years ago, if the product is defective, if the hazard still exists, it doesn't go away. So isn't it more important to do whatever you can do to convince the consumer to return the product, and by giving them a replacement or giving them a repair or giving them a full refund so they can go out and buy a new product? The consumer is going to say, I've used it for 10 years, I've never been damaged, I've never been hurt. Why should I return it? Well, if you're only going to give them $1, I agree. What's the motivation? What's the incentive? So you've got to convince the company that the motivation to the consumer has to be strong enough so that they get rid of the consumer product. One of the things that helped the United States overcome that problem was product liability. The lawyers started suing the company for damages, and the companies were paying a lot more money out in lawsuits than they were paying for the recall. And the insurance companies and the company's board of directors started getting involved, saying, why are we paying so much money out to lawyers? Why don't we just conduct a recall, give the money to our customers, maybe they would appreciate it, and continue to buy our products? It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, that you want to keep your consumer happy, especially if you want return business. So one of the things we've stressed to companies is you've got to plan out the recall before you start it. There are things to do before the company even distributes a product or designs a product. Consider registration. Consider different aspects of registration so that in the event the product is recalled, you would be able to identify consumers. Some companies provide a registration card to consumers along with the more expensive products. Generally, appliances, you register your name. Why not register your name online rather than in a piece of paper? Why not tell the consumer you're not going to use their name for marketing purposes? We will only contact you in the event of a safety issue. And most consumers will fill out the form or will register if they understand they're not going to receive a lot of marketing information. And why do you want that? Because if you have close to 100% of the names of the person who owns the product, you don't have to do a lot of the steps that I'm going to be talking about for the next 30, 45 minutes. If you can reach the consumer who owns the defective product directly, that's nirvana. That's the only way to reach people. You can get rid of the product almost immediately. So one of the things we tell companies when we work with them on recalls is you've got to plan this out. A lot of companies will come in and believe that they call me and say, we've got a problem, we're ready to make an announcement tomorrow. Well, not so fast. We tell them no. Have you planned on notifying your retailers? How are you going to do that? Have you thought about consumers calling you? Are they going to register online? Do you have a replacement product? Do you have a repair for the product? Are you going to give out a refund? Do you have the infrastructure in place for fulfillment. If you're sending out a replacement, do you have the repair or the replacement? Is it going to take weeks? Is it going to take months? So before you make an announcement, you've got to have a lot of this information prepared and ready, because what you don't want to do is notify the consumer that you're recalling their product today. They call tomorrow, and then they're told, we'll get back to you in a couple months. Well, what are they supposed to do with the product? Should they stop using it? What if it's a refrigerator? What if it's something that they use, a coffee maker? People can't do without their coffee. So if they have a coffee maker and they're told not to use it, I probably would not stop using my coffee maker until I get a new one. So the company has to think these things out, depending upon the risk. Now, if that coffee maker had been involved with hundreds or thousands of fires, and there's probably a pretty good chance that it's going to catch on fire if you turn it on tomorrow, then the company needs to be able to say that and be able to show why it's important to stop using that product right then and there. But if the risk may be less serious, then maybe the consumer can use it for another couple weeks, even though you tell them to use it only when they're there, not when they're sleeping, and make sure they're watching it, things like that. So planning out is very important, especially the retailers. One of the things that we have found over the years is once you tell your retailer of a recall, they start to pull all the non-selling products off their shelves. So they use it sometimes as an opportunity to dump product that may not have been sold or selling very well, in addition to the recalled products. So again, contact, what we stress at the agency between a recalling company and their retailers, pick up the phone and talk to your buyer. Pick up the phone and call the retailer. Tell them you're working with the federal agency and that these are the steps you need to take to assure a good product return. Generally, we define the recall as a part of a bigger corrective action plan. The corrective action plan would include the notification, the remedy, the disposal of the recalled product or of the defective product. For CPSC, it will most always be a press release. It will be a website posting. It'll be a stop sale to the distribution chain, and it will include some type of toll-free number or a registration where consumers can go to people or go back to the company and tell them what they have. One of the things that we've been doing more recently are trilateral recalls. We've been doing joint recalls with Health Canada probably for almost 10 years now maybe, and we've done several hundred of them, where a company comes to the United States, they have a reporting obligation to us. We ask them when they report to us, did you sell the product anywhere in North America? How about the Western Hemisphere? What countries did you sell the product? Did you sell it in Colombia? Well, then we can pick up the phone and talk to Colombia regulators and say, hey, we've got a company that's going to recall a product in the United States. They also sold to Colombia, they sold to Mexico, they sold to Peru, they sold to Ecuador. Perhaps we can all coordinate the activities that we're going to do so that maybe it's one announcement. We've been fortunate with Profeco to have one announcement on a Graco stroller, and we're now working with a number of companies involving a bicycle that we're going to be doing an announcement, we hope, with Mexico and Canada within the next several weeks. But this is an idea that came about as a result of meetings like this, where regulators who were present got together and said, you're working on that, I'm working on that. Wait a minute, they're working on that. Why not pool our resources together and try to do it one time, one remedy, one notice, where the company agrees to use its resources to basically notify the world. Now, we have a number of worldwide recalls, global recalls in the past. Apple did a Dr. Dre Beats speaker recall, I don't know, 6 months ago maybe. And I believe Colombia was a part of that announcement that we were able to get out. So, and Graco was also part of the, Colombia was also a part of the Graco announcement. So it's we're trying to formalize our process with Canada and Mexico, but our hope is eventually that we can include other countries as well who have similar ambitions to try to get the notice out quickly and in one time. So again, to the extent that we can pull in Colombia, we can pull in other countries, we want to capitalize on that. It's less resource intensive for the company. It's much more efficient for our governments to do it that way. So that would be our hope. These are, what I've listed here are some of the types of notifications that we consider when we're working with companies. As I said, the recalls are, we consider the corrective action to be voluntary, and we ask companies to really, it's reverse marketing. How did you sell the product originally? Did you use any marketing? Did you use any TV advertising? Did you do any internet advertising? To the extent that you can reach the owners of the products by going backwards and figuring out how you sold it, that would be the best. Almost every recall in the United States, we still require a recall poster be put up in stores. And, you know, all we have is anecdotal data to say that consumers or shoppers going into a Walmart may or may not see a recall poster. But we've learned over the last few years that there are a lot of other more effective ways to reach consumers, especially with the internet and with social media. So we've become a firm believer that all companies that conduct a recall need to use social media platforms in order to reach their customers. So I've put up here some examples, whether it's Google Plus or tweets or blogs or Facebook posts. We have recalls involving fast food restaurants where there are drive-thrus, and they'll put up a notice at the drive-thru window. They'll put notice in products. We had a barbecue grill, a grill that was being recalled. We put the notice in the barbecue briquettes that you use to fuel the grill. When we had a washing machine recall, we put a notice in laundry detergent, in the powder laundry detergent. So when they open the box, they pull out this notice saying, if you own a Kenmore or a General Electric washing machine, check the model because it's been recalled. Consumers tend to be very lazy, and I'm one of them. I hear about recalls. I get recalls from around the world every day. Way too many. So I'm going to pick the one that means the most to me. And if I get something in a more direct manner, if it goes on at Facebook where I may be following it, I'm going to follow that. I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to look for tweets. I'm going to look at Pinterest. Well, I'm not going to look. Someone's going to look at Pinterest. But that's an area that we found recently that Pinterest, for whatever reason, I think we thought it was more female-oriented, but for whatever reason, it's a phenomenal a source of recall information, and people who are getting their information that way and following it and tagging it, whatever they do on that. So when you work with a company, or if you're in a company and you have to do a recall, you ought to think broader rather than narrower. And again, what the difficulty is that within a company, you're going to have your marketing people tell you, no, 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 we'll do a recall, but we want to kind of whisper it, don't do it too loud. You have to take the steps. If you're spending the money, if you're taking the time to notify the consumer of the recall, you want to do it right. You don't want to have to repeat it. You don't want to have to be penalized with a penalty if you don't do it correctly, which is always the alternative. These are the notification measures that CPSC itself uses. We don't do it for each and every recall, but it depends upon the risk of injury. Again, we go back to the risk assessment, the risk monitoring, the hazard identification. We try to use more methods of notification for those products that can really kill you or has killed somebody, or the risk of injury is so serious that we need to blanket the United States with a lot of information. There are less risky products, And if there are less risky products, we don't want to use or pull all our triggers, because then people will start ignoring it and it won't have any value. So we try to tailor and create a corrective action plan, which includes a notification to what that company is able to do, what the risk is presented by that particular recalled product, and their money. I mean, not all companies are Apple. Not all companies can afford to do a lot of notice. And that kind of comes in where the common sense approach takes place at CPSC, at least, and I'm sure a lot of other agencies and regulators around the world. It doesn't make any sense to make them do all these things if at the end of the day the company goes out of business, because then nobody can help the consumer. So we try to pick one or two or three things that we think will be most effective. And with us, it's a negotiation with the company. Every company gets a compliance officer who actually negotiates the elements of the recall, negotiates the notification measure. I talked about social media. The advantages of using social media: it's free, direct communication. You can reach a lot more people than you can in a store. Not everybody goes into stores. Not everybody reads the newspaper. Our press releases go out, and they're not paid press releases. We rely upon the media to put the notice in the newspaper. And it used to be great because all the papers used to put out CPSC recall notices, but then the Department of Transportation started recalling cars. Food and Drugs started recalling a lot more food. Department of Agriculture started recalling meat. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, started recalling lawnmowers or cars that didn't meet the emission standards. So we're not the only regulator in town, at least in the United States anymore. We also have the problem with states. Individual states in the United States sometimes have their own law. While they may not conflict with the national law, they also can initiate a recall. So in order to try to cut through all that, we started focusing on social media as a way for consumers to get the message and to hear about it. We've got some facts here on social media. The social media market budgets are projected to double in the next 5 years. 83% of companies use social media. 80% of consumers who use social network sites prefer to connect to brands through Facebook. Again, it's not reading the print newspaper. It may not even be using the TV or looking at the TV. You've got Google Plus attracted 20 million users within the first few months. Here's the 80% of pins on Pinterest are repinned. State and local governments are using media, social media. So companies are comfortable now. Most companies, major progressive companies, even small companies, are comfortable now using Facebook, using Pinterest, using social media, doing tweets and doing blogs. So that's why we've been stressing. One of the priorities of the CPSC for this year and the next couple is that we're trying to improve recall effectiveness. We've had a number of occasions where a consumer has been injured by a recalled product because they didn't hear about it. And so we're trying to look at how can it be more effective. Most companies who come to us and want to do a recall will see all these symbols on their website, but they had no idea that they could use this forum or social media platform to recall products. So that's where we kind of provide the guidance to them to get them accustomed to the fact that they ought to be looking at social media. Here are some facts that we developed on Facebook, that we found on Facebook. 1.35 billion followers. When you post on Facebook, you can post a photo or a video. One of the things that we found, I guess, with Facebook and even some tweets, a thing to be aware of, a company was tweeting a recall announcement today, for instance, and then immediately following, they would have 10 other tweets. Well, what happens when a company does that? The recall tweet keeps going lower and lower and lower, so consumers can't find it. So as a result of that, what we've told companies to do, they can tweet it today. In 3 days, we're going to have them retweet it because we want to keep it prominent over a several-day period. Again, I work with companies every day. It's almost like a cat and mouse game. They're trying to stay one step ahead of me. I'm trying to stay one step ahead of them. We quickly realized when the first company did a tweet that they had never done tweets before. So they put the recall tweet out, and they immediately that day did about 20 other tweets. And so we realized what they were trying to do, or the marketing people maybe were trying to do, was to get the notice a little bit lower. And again, we understand the marketing people are there to sell products, but we also believe companies have an obligation when a product is bad or could hurt you, that they also have an obligation to step up and do whatever they can to retrieve it. And they do. I mean, again, we're talking about a very small percentage of companies that don't step up and do what they have to do. So here's some good examples where McDonald's had a Hello Kitty whistle that was recalled, and they put out this message. And then right next to it is the Britax water bottle, clearly marketed towards children, little kids, that could cut you. There was a laceration hazard. And they took, I mean, McDonald's especially, I mean, you would expect, I think, a McDonald's to be progressive and to try to reach their customers and to at least use methods of notification identified with their customers. So this was one of the, I mean, I think McDonald's, the recall rate was probably one of the largest we've ever seen, and we had a lot of products out there. And the problem with this whistle was you were supposed to only be able to blow it out so that it makes a noise. Unfortunately, some kids found that you could blow in, and the little ball that provided the noise, the noisemaker inside the whistle, somehow damaged the little compartment that it was in, and it was able to come out and go into the child's mouth as they sucked the air in. So fortunately, there was no serious medical issues. McDonald's caught this very early on, told us about it, and we worked out this recall with them. Here's just an example of some tweets that went out. Black Diamond, I think it's a mountain climbing. They use mountain climbing equipment or ski equipment. So it's fairly significant that the product that they put out, if you're climbing a mountain and you're relying upon these ropes and these devices to make sure you don't fall down, it's pretty significant. So they did tweets, a number of different tweets over a period of time, as well as their Facebook and press releases and other notice in order to try to reach their customers. So what I wanted to do by showing you this is at least give you some examples of actual recalls that were conducted in the United States where social media has been used. Here's a bicycle that went out with a tweet, turned bicycle. And I probably could not have shown you these notices maybe even a year ago, because companies weren't doing this. So I mean, this, again, over a 40-plus year career, it's amazing how we've moved away from paper and we've now gone to more social media and internet. One of the things that we require of companies is that if they have a website, they need to put notice of the recall on their website. And it has to be on the first entry point, prominent, that a consumer will see. So if you go to a McDonald's.com website and they have a recall going on, you'll be able to see right away either a recall note or some type of notice about their recalls. Again, companies say, what does a website have to do with a recall? Well, what it has to do is if you have a brand following or a brand loyalty, people will hear about a recall maybe in the news. They'll hear something happen with Hello Kitty and McDonald's. We believe they will go directly to McDonald's.com, or if they hear about it involving General Electric or another company, the best way to reach your customer is on the website. And so what we encourage companies to do is not to hide it, but to put it prominent, leave it out there for a period of time. Here's some examples, or I guess this is the Britax. This was the first thing you saw when you went onto the Britax website right after they announced the recall. You can't get much more prominent than that, I would think. So if somebody just heard about a recall involving Britex, and then they went onto their website, or Brita, I'm sorry, not Britex, Brita, then they would have seen this particular recall. Britex is another company that makes car seats. I didn't mean to impugn them, I don't know. They've also had some recalls, and they do website notice too, but this is a Brita recall. Online registration, we can't tell companies enough times that rather than having people call a phone number to register for the recall after the recall is announced, to the extent that you can get consumers to go onto a website and register it, it's so much quicker. You don't have to rely upon a person. You've got a form that the consumer fills out. You can qualify them for the recall, and generally it allows contact 24/7, whereas if you have an operator, you may only be open during the day and not convenient to all consumers. So to the extent that it also helps with reporting to the regulator, because if you do it online, then the company has a detailed report on how many people registered, how many people got the notice, how many people got the recall or the remedy. So we encourage online registration. One of the more recent types of notice that we've started to get from companies is a text message. I know I get text messages from a number of retailers and some companies, and surprisingly, somehow, I guess it's because it's a smartphone, sometimes I'll go into a particular store, and all of a sudden I start getting text messages from that store. Well, how do they know I'm here? Well, they know where I am. They're tracking me. If I gave them permission on my phone to send me messages, they pretty much know where I am. So a couple companies who had a recall started text messaging to their customers because, again, brand loyalty was very important. So it's not something that any company had thought about, but I think one of our compliance officers started getting messages from Macy's or a department store or a Walmart or a Rite Aid or a drugstore or a grocery store, and started thinking about how do they know where you are, they do, and how do they know what your interests are, because generally they can track your purchases and they know what you're buying and what you're not buying. So to the extent that they can match up the consumer with a recall that they've conducted, they're starting to send those types of text messages out. So it's, again, as regulators, if you're a regulator or even a company, it's another way of trying to reach customers who may have purchased a recalled product. Google Plus, here's some information on Google Plus. I think we've been big on Facebook for the last few years, encouraging people to use Facebook. I think a number of businesses have gone to Google Plus and a number of consumers also. And I think almost in any given week or month, there are new social media platforms that come into being. So it's important as companies as well as regulators that we maintain our presence. We understand what social media platforms exist. I've got, I think, 3 compliance officers in the compliance area that we've sent to various training courses on how to use social media, on the different metrics and algorithms that are used, and as well as how to track it and analyze it, because we need to know as much as the companies need to know. So I've sent at least 3 compliance officers. Our communications office which is a separate office, has a social media person that does only social media. So that is also a resource to us. So as a regulator, if you don't have a social media coordinator, or if you don't have somebody that you can go to, it's something that you may want to look at in the future, because what we found early on was a company would come in and tell us they can't do this for this reason or that reason. Since we didn't have the training and we didn't really have the understanding, we couldn't dispute them. But now we've got people, we're hiring people who are more social media savvy, internet savvy, but we're also training these people so that we can challenge the company, we can push back on them, and when they say no, we have a reason why they should get to yes. And I think that's important as regulators, that rather than just saying no, we ought to have some alternative or option for the company to be able to do. Here we talked to, I think Carol talked to IKEA earlier. IKEA has always, more recently maybe, but has always been on social media. They've got millions and millions of followers. So unfortunately, sometimes we do IKEA recalls and they have some problems, but they're never shy about going out on the various social media platforms that they occupy and putting the notice out there. A number of companies have apps. The McDonald's company, McDonald's put out a Hello Kitty app. So anybody who had downloaded that app, when they went to the Hello Kitty app, a notice popped up to tell them about the recall with that particular whistle. And again, it's more companies are becoming more technical savvy. They have their own app that they push out to consumers, and we just need, as regulators and companies, we need to remember that that might be a new option to try to reach consumers who may not have heard about the recall through traditional methods. So I think here are some examples of the actual notice that went out to the app owner. It's one of my compliance officers. It's their actual smartphone showing the recall notice that they were sent directly. And I mean, to me, everybody is on their phone. I mean, I have kids, and yeah, it's hard to get a conversation going, so I text them. I mean, that's the only way we can talk. So, and you know, it's probably a lot better that way sometimes. But, so this is a natural extension of the use of your smartphone. So to the extent that you can get a company to actually use one of these apps and to send a recall notice, I think that's the way to do it. Of course, there may be privacy laws or privacy concerns, and we're always, we recognize that and we're aware of that. Generally, a consumer, when given a notice or a choice to have safety information, they generally will buy in and allow it. But that would depend upon the company and their individual notice. The other method, I mean, YouTube is a great way to receive a lot of different information, some that you want and some that you don't want. But what some companies are doing with YouTube, where there's a repair involved in the recall, rather than try to send out a notice to the consumer on how to assemble it or how to repair it, they put a link into a YouTube spot, and the consumer can go on YouTube and see exactly how to install the recall or repaired product. You have a recall product, there may be a repair that has to be done, there may be some modification that needs to be done to the product. You can follow it on YouTube. And people are more and more comfortable with using YouTube to get information like that, whether it's for household repairs or car repairs or any type of information, people are comfortable. So again, rather than a consumer having to call the company and be told over the phone how to do this repair, they can look at it in their own home. So it's another option. Email notification. A lot of companies still collect people's home addresses, and they want to send out what we call snail mail to people. And that's okay, because some people are too busy maybe to receive email notification, but generally there are some steps a company can take to put keywords in their email to the consumer so that you can distinguish it from an advertisement or spam. So if you put important safety notice or recalled product information in the subject, you don't include any attachments, so it doesn't look like it might be a spam or something else that may steal something, identity or something like that. A lot of our retailers, at least in the United States and probably around the world, they have loyalty cards for those customers that keep coming back, consumers that come back. And generally you have to register your email address. So that's a good way to be able to receive information about recalls. So again, it's something to think about as you're working with companies, or if you're a company, what email notification do you have and how can you distinguish it from marketing or advertisements? The other popular social media sites, I talked about Pinterest. Instagram provides some great photos of what the recalled product will look like, so why not put it on Instagram if the company has it? There's Flickr, blogs, Tumblr, Vine, LinkedIn. In the United States, and I assume worldwide, there are various online forums and communities. There's mom's community, there's baby community, there's outdoor enthusiasts, appliances, you name it. You can probably find a group that has set some type of forum up for discussion back and forth. And those are the types of communities or organizations that a recalling company or a regulator ought to be suggesting that the notice be put out there. So again, I think it's a lot broader. We used to think only about an in-store poster and maybe a mail that went to a company's or a consumer's home, but there's broader ways now to get the recall notice out. What we encourage companies who are conducting a recall to do is to, again, reverse marketing. Don't hide the fact that it's a recall. Don't hide the fact that the product presents a risk of injury. If a death has occurred, we make the company put the death up front. Because if I'm getting information from hundreds of different sources and I'm being bombarded with a lot of different information in a lot of different forums, if I have a product that's killed somebody, that's actually been involved in a death, I think I want to know about that first. So don't just tell me that the product is unsafe and can be recalled. Tell me what it's done, because that will then give me some priority in my own mind on how quickly I need to react to that notice. So again, it's the battle between the regulator and the companies. They don't like to send out bad news. We encourage them that it may be bad news this once, but if you don't tell the consumer up front, they're not going to appreciate it later on if they get an injury or a death in their own family. So to the extent that you can put the notice up front, be very clear about what it means, that's the important thing to do. Another thing that Consumer Product Safety Commission did over the last couple years is we had a contest for anybody to develop an app on notifying consumers about a recall product. So I think the contest was open, and there's no payment, there's no money that exchanged hands. They didn't win anything other than notice by the Consumer Product Safety Commission that these 4 companies or 4 developers, software developers or app developers, came up with an idea on how to reach consumers to notify them of recalls. And that may be something that regulators in countries around the world want to do. You can have a local contest in your country or in your area targeted to developers of apps to come together to come up with a way to try to help consumers weed through all the different messages that they get on a daily basis and point them to the ones that are most important about product safety recalls. So this is pretty, I think, self-explanatory. These companies or these developers came up with these ideas. I haven't checked lately on I think they're all available for free. I think one of the requirements of the contest was that whatever you develop, and if it ultimately goes forward, there would be no cost to the consumer. It would be something that's available free. And I think these were all pushed out in a big press conference, and hopefully it started other software developers thinking, are there easier ways to try to get and identify consumer products that are under recall? Why do we do all this? You know, again, it comes down to saving lives, preventing injuries. Most of the time when we're recalling a product, it's going to be as a result of either the potential for injury or an actual injury that's occurred. Most of our recalls don't involve injuries. Most of our recalls are where a company may have caught a problem because a consumer complained, or the company did testing throughout the life of the product and found this problem, so the company has come to us. And then it's important to relay the message to the consumer to take action. And what we do is we do look at recall effectiveness. We look at the number of remedies, the number of replacements. We look at the number of people that got the message. We can't force consumers to stop using a recalled product, but what we can do is make them aware of what the risk is. If you choose to continue to use this product, even though we've told you to stop using it, you could get injured in this way or that way. then ultimately it's up to the consumer, but the company and the government has given them the best information so they can make an informed decision. So we track recall effectiveness. Lately, our Congress and our commissioners, I've got 5 commissioners and we've got 4 commissioners and a chairman that I have to keep happy. They're not happy because they believe the recalls aren't effective, that they're hearing from consumers who said they never heard about the recall. So we're ramping up our efforts on social media. We're talking to companies about product registration. And we're also, when a recall is announced, we monitor it a lot more closely. Companies have to give us a 30-day progress report while we monitor the recall. So every 30 days, we get a report from the company on how effective their notice has been. How many consumers read it, how many people went to their website, how many tweets, how many followers, how many new injuries or incidents, hopefully none, how many people asked for the repair, how many people asked for the replacement product, how many people asked for the refund. After about 60 to 90 days, we sit down with our compliance officer, we look at the effectiveness. If we believe that enough people haven't been reached, we'll go back to the company and say, you've got to do more. If an injury or, God forbid, a death comes in during that period or any time after, then we would automatically, almost always automatically go back to the company and ask them to do more notice. One of the things that we've done when a death has come in on a recall product, we went back to the company and got them to do an incentive where they gave $50 extra to people who responded to the recall. So money is a good way to get consumers to respond. To the extent that you can motivate a consumer through money, that safety alone doesn't do it. I would think safety alone would motivate consumers. But again, we're competing with a lot of different recalls. We're competing with a lot of different messages. So these are all the types of things and ideas that CPSC has developed over the years. As I told you, we don't own the book on recalls. We've got some experiences that we've developed over the years. We're more than interested in hearing from other countries as well, and other regulators, on your ideas. If you have something that's worked for you, maybe it's something that we could try, or we can try a pilot together or some type of program together. So you've got my information up there. I can be reached anytime. You've got Tilvin Bernal's information. She can be reached almost any time. We're kind of connected to our work BlackBerry, whether we like it or not. But if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want more information, I'll be happy to give it to you. Again, thank you very much for allowing me to come here. I really appreciate it, and good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Sean, for your talk. I think we have time for a couple of questions, okay? Así que si alguien tiene una pregunta para hacerle a él.
Buenas tardes, Mark. Oh, just they brought you the.
Put it on, you see now it's a test.
Buenas tardes, Mark. Constantemente en la Superintendencia de Industria y Comercio recibimos por parte de los empresarios del sector automotriz que llegan a mi oficina quejas constantes que no logran avanzar en sus recalls o en sus campañas de seguridad porque no logran contactar a sus consumidores. La queja, más que de otros sectores, de hecho, porque el mayor número de recalls que tenemos es de ese sector, viene de los empresarios, dicen, no los logramos contactar. Entonces, quisiera saber desde la experiencia de la CPSC, ¿cuál es la mejor forma para los empresarios de este sector de hacer llegar o de comunicar esas campañas a sus consumidores? Esa es la pregunta que tengo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Let me put out first that CPSC does not do cars. We do consumer products that are used around the home, but I can tell you from my experience talking with our Department of Transportation, because we are working closely with them on recall effectiveness. They have the car manufacturers purchase the registration lists from the individual states where the cars are registered, because in the United States, all cars have to be registered in a state in order to have a license to be able to drive your car. So there are publicly available groups or organizations that collect the data from the individual state Department of Motor Vehicles. And with that, they make the purchase, they give it to the manufacturer. It tells you the make and model and year of the car. The manufacturer then can go through that data and send out notice directly to the owner of that car. And I don't know, again, what I've also learned over the years there are many different organizations that buy and sell data so that somebody knows where I live, they know what kind of car I drive, they know the kind of food I buy, they know the kind of fast food restaurants I go to, they know where I went to college, because there are lists that I'm on, whether I liked it or not, that were made over the years with my name on it. So again, manufacturers can go to outside organizations that sell mailing lists that you can tell them who you're looking for and what that person bought, and you can probably have it purchased, and then they can send you a direct notice of a recall.
¿Alguien más tiene una pregunta? Te lo voy a dar a ti y después el de azul.
Gracias. Es solo para confirmar, es más importante el cumplir con el requerimiento de la comunicación al 100% de las personas que adquirieron el producto y no necesariamente con el retorno del mismo producto pues devolverlo a la compañía, porque finalmente hay personas que, como mencionaban, no lo quieren devolver o finalmente no les interesa devolverlo o alguna cosa, pero digamos que se justifica con que se haya contactado al 100% de los compradores del producto.
A great question. And I think we've evolved over the last few years. We used to only count the number of products that were returned in a recall. We've gotten smarter because we realize people don't always want to return the product. They may be aware of the risk and they change their behavior. It's hard to measure behavior changes, but because of that, in response to that, a recall can be very effective without a lot of products being returned. And that's why it's most important to get the notice out as broadly as you can, and the notice really needs to have what the actual risk is, so that consumers can make an educated, intelligent decision on whether or not they want to get the replacement or the repair, or continue to use the product, or they may just throw it away and not tell anybody. So, great question, and I think publicly I have to say we encourage consumers to always return the product, because you don't want to risk, if they give it away to somebody, or if they sell it at a yard sale, that person may not know about the danger, so that's why we always say get rid of it. But, you know, if you don't get rid of it, if you change your behavior, that's probably okay too.
Última pregunta.
Relacionada con la anterior pregunta, usted mencionaba que había una obligación de hacer reportes mensuales del avance de la campaña. La pregunta es, después de que han sido contactados gran parte o todos los posibles afectados, ¿cuándo se decide relevar al productor de seguir cumpliendo con estos reportes a pesar de que no se haya necesariamente obtenido un número deseado de retornos?
You know, one of the things, we take a common sense approach to that. Department of Transportation for recalls, I believe, requires a 2-year quarterly reporting period. CPSC for consumer products requires every 30 days. There's no end date. It could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 5 years. What we tell the company that's doing the recall is, when you believe you have reached all the people you need to reach and that you've done all you can do to get them the remedy, ask us to close the case. Generally, it's going to be 6 months to a year, year and a half, 2 years. We'll look to see whether there's a 2 or 3 or 4 month period where nobody calls the company, nobody asks for the remedy. And once that happens, then the company will come to us. We'll sit down, we'll look at our databases. We go back to our original databases to see if anybody's complained about an injury involving that product. If there are no injuries, if it looks like the company did what they said they were going to do, we'll close it out. Now, when we close it, that means the company doesn't have to give us the report anymore. It stays on our website forever. We have recalls going back to the 1972, 1973. We sometimes have people who come to us and say, I bought this product 20 years ago, can you help me get a refund? As long as there's a company around, we'll go to the company and tell them, you need to take care of this consumer. They probably don't have the replacement, they probably don't have the repair, but again, if the company wants to restore goodwill and they want to have a customer for life, give them another product and get rid of that old product, and that's what most companies do.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos por sus preguntas. Sí, démosle un aplauso.